Hi and welcome everyone, Lisa here. Thanks for taking the time to join me. So today I have a really fun technique I want to share with you. This is an ink blended background. We're using the Whimsy Stamps Honeycomb Drips Stencil to do this background. And I wanted to create the look of dripping chocolate. So when Whimsy came out with the Kiss Off stamp set at the beginning of the month, I thought the buy your own chocolate sentiment out of that stamp set was so funny, and I had this idea pop into my mind as soon as I saw it. So I wanted to go ahead and show you guys how to do it in case maybe you wanted to use this technique for Valentine's Day. It's creeping up on us pretty quick. So what I have here is a piece of 110-pound cardstock. Now I recommend that you use a heavyweight cardstock for this because we're laying down a lot of ink. And the heavier the cardstock, the better it's going to hold all this ink we're applying to it. I do have purple tape attached to the back side of that panel. And the reason that I did that was so that as I'm moving my stencil up the panel to ink blend, I can just push down on the sides of the stencil and it'll hold it in place while I'm working. Now, because this stencil actually has not only the drips, but the honeycomb as well, we need to mask that honeycomb off so we don't accidentally stencil that while we're working on our panel. So I just took a piece of masking tape, cut it down to size, and then just covered up the honeycomb design on the stencil. And I even let the masking paper hang off the end of the stencil. It helps hold it in place. Now, what I'm doing is I'm taking my blender brush and I'm loading it up with the ink and I'm pushing it down onto the stencil straight up and then lifting it up. So I'm applying the ink to the design and then fading the ink out as I move the brush up and away from the paper. And that's what's giving me that nice drip look there with the white in between each layer. And don't worry, we're going to come in and take some of that starkness out once we're done with the blending with the stencil. Now, here's some tips for you if you're using dye inks, and I recommend dye inks for this because they're going to give you the best results. You want to start with your lightest ink first. And the reason that you want to do that is because when you're using dye inks, it's just like using alcohol markers. If you start with your darker color first, the lighter color is going to saturate that dark color and cause it to fade out. And we don't want that to happen. So start with your lightest color and then go to the darkest color. Now I'm using Memento dye inks. They're my favorite, and I'm using Desert Sand and Rich Cocoa for this part here. So I'm just taking that stencil and every time I move it up, I shift it to the left or to the right, trying to keep the drips offset from each other. And on this panel here, because I did one before this, and I'm going to show that one to you, but on this panel, every time I moved the stencil up, I moved it up above what I had already done. So on the first stencil, I layered, and I think I actually prefer the look of moving it up above what you've already done and leaving some lighter area in between each section. Remember to always keep that brush moving straight because that's what's giving you the look of the highlights and the lowlights. So some areas look like they're curving in and away from us, and then some areas look like they're curving out towards us. And that's what, with that stencil, is so cool when you use your brush and those straight motions. Don't blend in a circular motion because if you do, you won't get that detail like I have here. Now, what I decided to do was just to come in lightly with the lighter color and take some of that starkness away. And it won't hurt it if you're light with it, but if you get heavy-handed with it, it's going to fade that darker ink out. So just be very light with the application. So what I decided was I wanted to make it a little bit darker. So the panel on the left is the first panel that I did. And it's not perfect. There were some areas where I actually messed up a little bit. But I was like, you know what? I'm doing some splatters on this, so it's going to be okay. So we're actually going to use it as well. But you can see the difference in layering the ink, not moving that stencil up quite so far when you go to do the next layer and you're laying that ink one on top of the other. So what I decided to do was to really give this more detail was to come in with the Espresso Truffle ink, and it's a darker brown. And I'm just barely adding that in certain areas to the drips and in those areas that I want to look like they're farther away. So by coming in and applying just the smallest amount of this Espresso Truffle ink, it's giving me some great dimension on this. So I'm super excited about the way this turned out. I love the look of it. I cannot wait to do a birthday card with this. And maybe do like layers, like make it look like there's cake and then a couple of layers of chocolate dripping down the panel. That's going to be so much fun. So once I had all the ink blending done, I decided that I wanted to add some white details to this. And I'm going to come in with my cartoonist pen and add those details. I'm also going to do some ink white splatters on this, and I love the white splatters. They just made it to me. If you don't like the splatters, you could completely skip this part and just go with the ink blended background. Now, you could do this with pink ink to do a strawberry frosting look. That would be amazing. You could do any color you want to create whatever color icing you're looking for. So now that we have our backgrounds done, I want to set those aside and let them dry. Now, Whimsy just recently released the connected heart die. So what I did was I cut that out of red cardstock. And I went ahead and I stamped and heat embossed the sentiment "Buy Your Own Chocolate" with white embossing powder to the center of that heart. I glued the heart down to the front of the card like you see here, and then for the center where my sentiment stamped and heat embossed, I put mounting foam on the back of that to pop it up away from the outline of the heart. So that's pretty much going to wrap us up. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think about these in the comments below. For more information on the products I used, you can find the links in the description box below. And until next time, take care.